Well, so today we have a parable. You know, it's funny, one thing about churches or Christians, we've been doing this stuff for so long that we've had a lot of time to, make things more complicated than they need to be. We have this word parable. Parable really just means story. And when Jesus tells parables, that's a word you might hear around. It's a word people almost never use except when it comes to talking about Jesus and these stories that he tells. And it might be a little bit easier if instead of calling them parables, we just said the story of. That would make it a lot simpler. Now, a parable, I guess it's not just like, it's kind of like a fable. I don't know if you know Aesop's fables about the talking animals, and each one has a little lesson. Well, a parable is that kind of story, except the stuff that happens in it is meant to be understandable. It's stuff that might happen to you in your day-to-day life. Nowadays, we call these sermon illustrations. That might be another thing a term you could use. But the point is, Jesus is telling a story here to make a point. And he's using everyday things that everybody can understand, that would make sense to people he was talking to. Now, of course, the catch is that Jesus was talking 2,000 years ago, and the things that made sense to his audience don't make quite as much sense to us. So when we read one of Jesus' stories, it's often helpful to get a little background on what's going on. Now, we understand what wheat is, even if if we were telling the story today, we might use soybeans instead. And we certainly understand what weeds are. But in this story, the key to understanding the story that Jesus tells is that it was a very specific weed. There on the right, you see some unripe wheat. On the left, there's a plant called darnel, which I guess actually grows around. You might see this. Darnel is a very common weed. It still is in a lot of parts of the world. And the thing about it is, when it grows up, it looks just like wheat. They're very, very similar plants. And so, if you go to a field of darnel and a field of wheat, or a field of two of them mixed together, it's hard to tell the difference. And on top of that, darnel, if you've ever seen, it's a grass. So when the weed, its roots go they spread all over the place. And so when you pull it up, you can pull up the wheat right along with it. Because it's actually got a better root system. That's what makes it a weed. It's got really good roots. So when this is growing in your wheat field, it's not as simple as going out and plucking out here and there. You've got two problems. First of all, you might miss it and pluck out some of the wheat along with your weeds. And second, you might pull the wheat right out with the weeds that you're trying to get rid of. So it's not as simple as just going in and weeding. You know, weeding isn't really that simple to start with. But it's not even something you can just go and do. And the story of this enemy who goes and sneaks in the middle of the night and sows his weed seed around, that actually happened. In the laws of the time, that was one of the crimes that was punished. And so it was a way to get back at somebody you didn't like, to sneak into their wheat field and spread these weed seeds around. This actually happened. And so Jesus is talking about something that took place on a regular basis. That the farmer would go and plant the good seed, and then someone would sneak in and plant bad seed, and you would start to notice that there was a problem. But you couldn't really address the problem until the harvest came. When, first of all, you could tell the difference between the wheat with the grains and this weed, and then just take it all in and separate it out. That's the image here that Jesus is going with. And that's well and good. So it's a story. We understand that story. But we're left with the question, what exactly does it mean? What's the point that Jesus is trying to make? These stories that Jesus tells can be a little complicated or confusing, or even if you understand the facts of the story, the meaning of the story isn't always clear. This is one of those. But we have a little advantage with this story that we don't get with most of Jesus' parables, and that's that the Bible actually records the explanation. Jesus tells a story, and his disciples finally come up to him and say, "What are you talking about? What's the point of this story?" And it says, Jesus said, "Oh, here it is." And so this is it. Jesus says, "The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man." That's Jesus. So Jesus is the guy spreading the good seed. The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom. Those are the people who are close to Jesus. The weeds are the children of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. Just as the weeds are collected and burned up with fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all evildoers, and they will throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Now, I just want to say, the weeping and gnashing of teeth kind of pops out at you in that reading. We're going to come back to that, but it's at the end. It's at the end for a reason. So bear with me a little bit. The reason I wanted to highlight this reading is because for years and years and years and years and years, like centuries, almost everybody who talks about this has the same interpretation. They say that this thing of the wheat and the tares is about the church. And it's about how if you're in a church, you have some good people in the church, you have some bad people in the church, and you can't try to root out the bad people. You just have to accept there are going to be bad people in your church along with your good people. And if you're a person who's responsible for leading a church, I hate to say it, but here that's everybody. Remember, one of our principles in our Christian church is that everybody has a share in the leadership of the ministry of the church. It's not your job to go around and pick out the bad people and try to get rid of them. And for centuries, that's what people said this means. Almost unanimously. And the only problem with that is that it doesn't fit what Jesus says. First of all, Jesus doesn't even mention the church. Jesus doesn't say the field is the church. Jesus didn't even have a church. You know, he didn't go to a building that said the me church, the church of me, and preach on Sunday. The church came along after. Jesus says the field is the world. And when he talks about the good and bad seed, he's talking about people who are in the world. And so he's not talking at all about what we are supposed to do in the church. He's talking about what God is doing in the world. And he's addressing a problem that comes up a lot in the course of the Bible, over and over again, which is that when you do the right thing, it doesn't always seem to accomplish anything. It doesn't get you anywhere. And we think of this like it's a surprise, I guess. But I have people who come to me all the time and say, if I lied to the government, or if I done this unethical thing at work, or if I had behaved badly in this way, gone along with the crowd when they were doing something wrong, I'd be a lot better off now. People wouldn't be mad at me. I'd be getting my checks. My job would be secure. Things would be going a lot smoother if I only was doing the wrong thing. And this seems to be a surprise to people. Like doing good is supposed to make your life easier. And I've talked about this many times before, but if you look at Jesus and his life, and the fact that he went to the cross, it should be pretty clear that according to what Jesus taught in Jesus' life, doing good is not going to make your life easier. In fact, doing good will usually make your life harder. That's what makes it doing good. If you think about it, it's like Jesus says, if you're only good to the people who are going to give you something back, who cares? Everybody everybody is going to do good things if they're going to get paid for it, right? Nobody gets excited. You think of these like extreme home makeover, these people who go out and rebuild a house. Nobody gets excited about the people who go out and get $100,000 to rebuild a house. We call them contractors. There's nothing wrong with that, but they're just doing a job. The times when people are doing good is when they do something and get nothing back. And maybe it's hard to realize sometimes we do something good and get negative back. We get attacked or punished. People don't mind giving, people don't mind doing something for nothing. But to do something and then get even more negativity, I had to think there for a minute, even more negativity dumped on you, that kind of galls us. And we can easily look around and say, well, why are those bad people coming out okay? Why are those bad people doing so well? Those people are doing all this stuff wrong, and it's paying off. Well, yeah. In the day-to-day, this world, looking at just the outside, doing bad stuff can pay off. If it didn't, people wouldn't be doing it. And so Jesus is talking about the fact that in this world that we live in, the field, there are people who are doing good, there are people who are doing bad, and they're together. God isn't going around spiting all the bad people or making them do right or any of the rest of that. That's the first point. The second point gets back to those weeds. The weeds and the wheat look very similar. And this is where you have to think for a minute. They look similar until they bear fruit. They bear fruit at the end. You don't get to find out until the end of the story who's the weed and who's wheat. And I read one sermon about this that said any person who's serious about their faith should listen to this and think, am I sure that I'm really one of the wheat? That kind of stopped me for a minute.